friends, it's Gwen. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to share with you the worst books that I read in 2018. This is not a video that I had planned. I had filmed my best books of 2018 and they're still kind of sitting right in front of me in like a sea of books. And I decided to look up the books that I rated 1 and 2 stars this year to see if that would even grant it its own video. Plus I said that if you guys wanted to see it, I would do it. So I kind of wanted to prepare for it, like just in case. And then I realized that I had 12 books that I rated 1 and 2 stars. So that was enough for me to think that even if you guys don't want to see it, you need to see it, because I want you to steer clear of these books if your reading tastes are like mine. And so 12 books in total I'll be talking about today. 8 of them were 2 stars and 4 of them were 1 stars. So let's go ahead and jump into the 2 stars and then we'll ratchet it on down to the really bad books, the 1 star books. First 2 star book is After You by Jojo Moyes. I know a lot of people had a problem with Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. I really enjoyed that book. I actually have it right there. This is like kind of a follow-up after the main event of the first book, and I did not like this one little bit. I was completely bored to tears the entire time. I didn't really understand the point of this novel because the main story kind of ended in the first book. So I wasn't really looking forward to this book that much, but I thought maybe. And yes, no. So this one got 2 stars, and I would just stick with the first one if you liked the first one and just pretend like this one does not exist. And I was talking to my husband about this, and I don't think he realizes like how many books I read, because he was shocked that I had like enough books to share with you guys that I didn't like. And that's just because I read a crap ton of books, and I don't go out seeking books that I'm not gonna like. It's either by an author, perfect example, that I like their previous work, so I pick up a sequel or like another book that they've written and I don't like it, or it's a story that sounds really interesting and it just doesn't turn out to be that interesting at all. Let's see, the next one, this is one of those occasions. Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. This was super hyped. Beautiful cover. Sounds like an amazing story about kind of like a college coming of age story, where 2 people through texting become each other's emergency contact. And there were so many things wrong with this book. I did a whole, my husband's phone just rang. I did a whole review of this book, and I don't think that my review got a lot of love, just because I was so negative on this. But again, it does have a beautiful cover, but the story inside, not so good. I have also talked about previously how I love this poet, but I finally picked up No Matter the Wreckage by Sarah Kay, and I gave it 2 stars. There were a couple of poems in here, and by a couple, I really enjoyed a love poem number 137, and then the only other 2 poems that I liked were B, which I previously talked about and read as a standalone, and then The Type, which I read as a standalone. I also liked Lightning, I guess, and Maybe in the Event of an Emergency. I marked that one too. But everything else I did not like. So in my opinion, I would get the standalones of B and The Type and maybe some of her other standalones. But this collection was not that good. I gave it 2 stars. Next 2-star book I read was The Layover by Amy Andelson and Emily Meyer. I picked this up when my husband and I went to Washington, D.C. We had a whole day in Washington, D.C. We were in Union Station. I decided to stop by one of the little places and get a book to read while we were waiting for our train out of the city, and I picked this up because I was like, layover, how perfect. And again, the cover is like really pretty and it sounds like a fun story. However, it just completely fell flat. The characters and the storyline overall were sort of boring, so 2 stars on this one. The next book that got 2 stars is Born Darkly by Trisha Wolfe, which I'm kind of surprised because I've heard a lot about this author in this dark romance genre, dark romantic erotic genre. This one I read with my friend Nicole, and I don't really remember her thoughts on it. I don't think we talked too much about it, which is saying a lot because we usually talk a lot about the books that we read together, and this one just didn't do it for me at all. It was completely awkward and weird. That's what I remember. But the follow-up book may be better. I'm just not really sure I'm interested. The next one I'm actually going to pop in a picture of, and this is Paper Girls Volume 3 by Brian K. Vaughan. I read volumes 1 and 2, obviously, before I read this one. I believe I rated the first volume 3 stars, and then the second volume 4 stars, or vice versa, like maybe 4 then 3 stars. For some reason, I continued on, and I ended up reading the third volume 2 stars. I don't think I'm going to pick up any of the further volumes. The art is really cool and the idea of the story is very cool, but at the same time it feels very disjointed. Next 2-star book that I read was Our Kind of Cruelty by Araminta Hall, and I was so excited about this because it was blurbed by Gillian Flynn. It said, "I loved it right down to the utterly chilling final line." And I got this for my April book of the month because I usually pick the thriller mystery book, whatever that is. I don't even remember the last line in this book, so I'm just going to remind myself what it was. I remember about this book, I think I either did like a first impressions or maybe I just talked about it a lot in my wrap up. Yes, I don't really remember if that was creepy or not, but what I did think about this book is that if the book had an alternate ending, I think it would have been so cool and so like twisted and creepy, but I can't really tell you the twist that I had in mind because it would spoil what the ending to the book was. But yeah, I think my idea would have been so much better and it would have made it a 5 stars, but as written, 2 stars. And the last book that I rated 2 stars this year was Switch by Megan Hart. I just randomly picked this up in the romance section. It sounds, again, like a really cool premise about a girl that lives in an apartment building, and she starts getting these anonymous notes in her mailbox, and she knows that they're not meant for her, but she starts following what the notes are telling her to do, and then she's trying to find out who's leaving the notes. So that sounds so cool, but it was so dumb. And I remember reading it over the summer. I actually finished this on my way to visit my parents for a week. So like right before my vacation started, I read this on the train to see them, and I didn't like it at all. 2 stars. Now let's jump into my 4 1-star books. So if you thought those were bad, these were even worse, and 2 of them are poetry collections, and the other 2 are novels. I'm going to talk about the one that I actually don't have a copy of first because I got rid of it. So I was supposed to be on some panel to judge, I think it was maybe the mystery thriller category. Was it the BookTube Awards? I don't even quite remember what it was for, but it ended up not happening because of people's schedule, and I was so pissed because I had to read 2 books that sucked to get to it. One I read in 2017, and then this was I think this was the first book that I read in 2018, and I hated it so much, and it's Hunting Prince Dracula. So the first one was Stalking Jack the Ripper. The second book was Hunting Prince Dracula. And I think the third book is out right now, and it's like Finding Houdini. And the first book was okay. I think I rated it 2 stars. But what is this one? Hunting Prince Dracula. I just can't. The characters didn't really progress, or like there was no really arc to the story. I did a whole review of it. I'll link it for you because I go into more detail. Like I said, this was literally the first book I read of 2018, and so many people out there loved that book that I had to read both of them because it was like the sequel that was getting the attention, and I had to read both of them. And I'm so glad that we didn't have that, because that was like one of the popular books and I'm pretty sure it would have won, and I would have been like so upset. I rated this book 1 star. The writing sucked. It's one of those books that the author either doesn't explain a single thing to you and you're so freaking confused, or they over explain things to the point that you're just done with the description. You don't even care what it looked, smelled, tasted, whatever. Like, you're just like, I'm done. And then the actual Dracula part, I just think plugging huge, like Jack the Ripper and Houdini and Dracula, like plugging those names into this, it just pisses me off so much, because like those are some of the coolest people, you know, myths and history and crime, and I'm hugely into that. But yeah, 1 star, you guys, and if I could give it none, I would, but I gave it 1 star. Lowest you could go. I mean, I guess I could have given it 0 stars. Moving on from that, I have 2 poetry collections and 1 other novel for you. This one is going to surprise a lot of people if you don't follow my channel, and this is like one of the first videos you're watching from me. I rated The Sun and Her Flowers 1 star. Milk and Honey, I think I gave 3 stars to, and this just took a nosedive with me. Milk and Honey, I'm glad that it exists because I think it got more people into poetry, the genre in general. However, I think that her poems are so basic, so bland, so, I mean, there were some good ones in here, don't get me wrong. Not everything is terrible, but there's so much here, and out of that I like 1 thing or 2 things. Like, that's just not worth it to me, especially when it's probably something I could have easily read somewhere else or listened to in song lyrics or something like that. And a lot of times I found myself forcing myself through her poetry, and I just don't think I'm going to do it anymore. I keep saying I'm going to give her another shot, and then I give her another shot, and I don't like it. So another poetry book that I absolutely could not stand. Luckily, I didn't spend any money on this one. I got this with some credit that I had at our local book exchange, and that is The Second Sex by Michael Robbins. So I got this because it looked like a nice short poetry book that I could get at that store with some credit, and I didn't really like it. I don't really remember much of it, but there is absolutely nothing tabbed here, and I think I wrote that it's not you, it's me, because this just wasn't like my cup of tea. And then the last book that I'm going to talk to you about that got 1 star from me this year is Sorority. Another beautiful cover by Genevieve Sly Crane, and this book, I did a first impressions video / review about this book. This book has a lot of trigger warnings. I tabbed it to death, if you can see that, and there's so many instances of slurs. It talks about eating disorders. There's offensive language. They talk about like teeth grinding and jaw clenching. They talk about hair pulling. There's cutting. There's infidelity. There's just so much. And it was overdone. It's like I understood the point of the story, but it kind of got lost with all of the trigger warnings and stuff like that. So I would just unfortunately steer clear of this. It just kind of falls into that like trap of stereotypes for sorority women, and I'm not about that life, so need to get rid of this one. So I do have this stack of books that I did not like this year. Like I said, these are my 1 and 2 star books. If you're looking for some recommendations, definitely check out my best of 2018 video, and just trust me when I say to stay clear of these books that I talked to you about today. They're just not worth it. There's so many other good books out there, but at the same time, if any of these are your favorites, please don't be offended by it. It's just my personal opinion and my reading tastes. So it is what it is. But anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you guys again in my next video. Bye!